The silence in our house has a weight to it now. It presses down on my chest, a physical presence where Griffin's laughter used to be. I'm sitting on the edge of our king-sized bed, the mattress barely dipping under my weight. My eyes are fixed on his side of the closet, the door left slightly ajar. Half the hangers are gone. The remaining ones, a few flannel shirts, his worn Stanford engineering hoodie, the suit he wore to my grandfather's funeral, hang with a kind of desolate space between them, like lonely soldiers after a lost battle. I'm Rowan, 31, or I was Rowan and Griffin. Now, I'm just Rowan, a consultant at a top-tier firm. A woman who knows how to build a 5-year plan for a multinational corporation but somehow failed to notice the structural decay in her own marriage. Looking back, the cracks were always there. Hairline fractures I chose to paint over with ambition and the promise of a better future. I met Griffin when I was finishing my MBA. He was already 5 years into his career as an environmental engineer, calm and self-assured in a way that felt like an anchor. He had this quiet passion for his work, designing sustainable water systems. I found it noble. I mistook his stability for a shared drive, assuming we were both climbing different ladders toward the same sky. But we weren't. We weren't even in the same atmosphere. The breaking point wasn't a singular, explosive event. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. It was every time I came home, buzzing with the electric energy of a successful client pitch, to find him contentedly sketching irrigation plans for his community garden. It was every time he passed on a management track opportunity because, as he'd say, then I'd be managing people who do the work I love, instead of doing it myself. It was every industry gala I attended alone because he'd rather spend a Saturday morning teaching kids how to compost. Last month, I landed the Kensington account. This wasn't just a project, it was the project. The kind that gets your name mentioned in executive boardrooms. The kind that paves the road to a partnership. I was working 18-hour days, coordinating with teams in London and Tokyo, living on caffeine and adrenaline. I was alive. I remember bursting through the door one night, my mind a chaotic symphony of logistics and strategy. We might have a breakthrough on the supply chain model, I announced, dropping my briefcase on the floor. If I can pull this off, the performance bonus alone could be our down payment for a place in Brighton Hills. Griffin looked up from the couch, a gentle smile on his face. He was holding a seed catalog. That's great, Ro. Hey, did you know you can grow tomatoes upside down? I stared at him. It was like he was speaking a different language. Griffin, did you hear me? Brighton Hills? The house Kendra's husband just bought a street over from? I heard you, he said softly. It's just, are we unhappy here? I like our house. The neighbors are nice. My garden is finally starting to produce decent zucchini. Frustration, hot and acidic, rose in my throat. It's not about being unhappy. It's about not settling. It's about reaching our potential. Our potential, he repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. Right. Well, I was just thinking, this project sounds really intense. Maybe we should take that weekend trip to the coast we talked about. Recharge a little. I felt a cold fury wash over me. He wasn't listening. He didn't see the monumental scale of what was happening. He saw my career-defining moment as an inconvenience, an obstacle to a weekend getaway. He was offering me a tranquilizer when what I needed was a partner who would sharpen my sword for the next battle. That night, lying in bed next to his steady sleeping form, I felt a chasm open between us. It was dark and deep, and for the first time I was afraid I didn't know how to cross it. The 2 weeks leading up to the final Kensington presentation were a blur of takeout containers, spreadsheets, and sleepless nights. The house became less of a home and more of a charging station for my body. Griffin tried. He'd leave a cup of coffee on my desk in the morning and a plate of dinner in the microwave at night, but his attempts at care felt like small, flimsy bandages on a gaping wound. They didn't fix the fundamental problem. He was on the shore, waving, while I was fighting a tidal wave, and he couldn't understand why I was so determined not to drown. The day of the presentation arrived. It was the culmination of 6 weeks of relentless work. I put on my sharpest suit, the one I called my armor, and practiced my opening statement in the mirror until my voice was hoarse. I had texted Griffin the time and the conference link, adding, "Would mean the world to have you watch. Need all the good vibes I can get." His reply came an hour later. "You're going to be amazing, Ro. I have that volunteer meeting at the community garden, but I'll be cheering for you in spirit. Knock 'em dead. Reading it, something inside me went cold. The community garden. He chose a meeting about fertilizer ratios over the most important moment of my professional life. The good vibes felt hollow, a cheap platitude from a man who had already checked out. I nailed the presentation. The CEO himself shook my hand, his eyes gleaming with the promise of future rewards. I walked out of that boardroom feeling like a conqueror, but the victory was strangely empty. The one person I wanted to share it with was busy playing in the dirt. When I got home, the house was quiet. I found him in the kitchen, washing vegetables in the sink, his fingernails still caked with soil. He turned, his face breaking into a wide, proud smile. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice full of genuine excitement. "I knew you'd kill it." And that's when I broke. The dam of resentment, built brick by brick over 4 years, finally burst. "How did it go?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "It went brilliantly, Griffin. No thanks to you. My husband, the man who is supposed to be my partner, was too busy with his petunias to even log on to a webcast." He flinched, his smile vanishing. "Rowan, it was a commitment I'd made months ago." "A commitment?" I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "What about your commitment to us? To our future? Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is? My colleagues talk about their husbands venture capitalists, surgeons, entrepreneurs, and what do I say? Oh, Griffin, he's very passionate about heirloom carrots." The words poured out of me, a torrent of poison I hadn't even realized I was storing. "You're holding us back. You're content with mediocrity, while I am killing myself to build something for us. You're wasting your potential, Griffin. You're wasting our potential." "My work is important," he said, his voice strained. "Bringing clean water to developing communities isn't a waste." "Oh, please, it's a noble hobby, not a career with a trajectory. You've peaked. You peaked at 35 and decided that was enough. I married a man with drive, not someone who'd rather play in the dirt than advance his career." He tried to argue then, about work-life balance, about finding happiness in things other than a job title. But I couldn't hear him. I was on a roll, determined to make him feel the weight of my disappointment. "You're failing us," I said, the words tasting like ash. "You're failing me. You're supposed to be my partner, but you're just dead weight. A failure as a husband who can't even match his wife's ambition. And thank God we don't have children yet, because you would be a failure as a father too, teaching them that it's okay to just be average." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and final. I had expected him to fight back, to finally show some fire. Instead, all the color drained from his face. He looked at me as if he'd never seen me before. He didn't say another word. He just turned, walked down the hall to his small study, and quietly closed the door. The silence that followed was worse than any shouting match. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no text, just an empty space on his side of the bed and a closet half full of ghosts. A week of agonizing silence passed. I oscillated between pure rage at his cowardice and a gnawing anxiety that twisted my stomach into knots. I called him, I texted him, I emailed him. It all went into a digital void. Finally, a sterile text message appeared on my screen. "We need to talk. Riverside Cafe. Saturday, 2 p.m. It's neutral ground." Neutral ground. Like we were warring nations negotiating a ceasefire, not a husband and wife. I arrived early, deliberately choosing my outfit. A soft blue dress he once said made my eyes look like the ocean. I armed myself with a mental list of talking points, a strategic plan to de-escalate the situation. He was overreacting. I was stressed. We could fix this. I just needed to make him see reason. I spotted him sitting on a bench by the water, wearing that faded Stanford engineering hoodie he refused to throw away. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. But he was clean-shaven, his hair neatly trimmed. A part of me wanted to run to him, to bury my face in that familiar, worn cotton and whisper, "Come home." But another part, the proud, wounded part, remembered how he had just walked out. He had abandoned our marriage. "You look well," he said as I sat down, his tone polite and distant, as if we were former colleagues bumping into each other at the grocery store. The small talk was unbearable. I waited for an apology, an explanation. Nothing. He just watched the ducks gliding on the pond. So that's it? I finally snapped, the silence stretching my nerves thin. You're not even going to explain why you left? He turned to look at me then, and his eyes were different. The warmth was gone, replaced by a deep, weary clarity. I think you explained it pretty clearly, Rowan. I'm a failure. Dead weight. Not good enough to be your husband or a potential father. The words, my own words, hit me like a physical blow. I was upset, I said, my voice defensive. You know how I get during big projects. I just needed you to understand what this means for our future. Our future? He repeated slowly, tasting the phrase. He shifted on the bench, turning to face me fully. You know, I've been thinking a lot about that. About what you said. Did you ever stop to consider that maybe I'm exactly where I want to be? The familiar frustration bubbled up. How can you say that? You could be leading a department by now, making twice as much. Let me finish, he cut in, his voice firm but not angry. For the last 10 years, I've been developing low-cost, sustainable water filtration systems. My work has helped bring clean water to 3 villages in Central America and a community in rural India. Last month, my team's project in Honduras was approved for a national expansion. It's not flashy, Rowan. It won't get me featured in Forbes. But it matters. It actually matters. I'm not saying your work isn't important, I countered, feeling like I was losing control of the narrative. But you could be doing so much more. That's just it, he said, shaking his head. That's your definition of more, not mine. I don't want to manage larger teams. I don't want my days to be filled with budget reviews and PowerPoint presentations. I want to be hands-on, doing the work. He pulled out his phone and swiped to a photo. It showed him, beaming, surrounded by a group of laughing children, all wearing oversized gardening gloves and holding up muddy carrots. These kids are from the community center downtown, he said, his voice softening. Most of them had never seen a vegetable grow out of the ground. Our garden program is teaching them about sustainability, about where their food comes from. That's success to me, Rowan. That's potential. I felt like we were on different planets, speaking different languages. That's lovely, Griffin. Really. But we can't build a future on feel-good moments and tomato plants. Actually, we can, he said, his voice hardening slightly. I make a 6-figure salary doing work I believe in. We have a beautiful home, no debt besides the mortgage, and healthy retirement savings. But none of that is enough for you, is it? Because Kendra's husband just bought a penthouse. I flinched. That's not fair. No, he shot back. What's not fair is having a partner who measures your worth by your LinkedIn profile. What's not fair is being told you're a failure because your dreams aren't big enough for her. He stood up, shoving his hands in his pockets. I love you, Rowan. I always have. But I don't recognize you anymore. The woman I married was ambitious, yes, but she also had compassion. She understood that success wasn't just about the size of your bank account. The woman you married grew up, I said, standing to face him, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. She realized that in the real world, you have to keep pushing, or you get left behind. Left behind by whom? He asked, his voice laced with a sadness that cut deeper than any anger could. By Kendra? By the neighbors? When did their opinions start to matter more than your own happiness? More than our happiness? He started to walk away, then paused and looked back over his shoulder. You know the irony? I have never been prouder of anyone than I am of you. Your drive, your intelligence, they're incredible. I just wish, for once, you could be proud of me too. And fully. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with the ducks and a hollow ache in my chest that felt infinitely worse than when I had first found the empty closet. In the days that followed our disastrous meeting at the park, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I worked. I buried myself in the Kensington account, volunteering for every ancillary project, staying at the office until the cleaning crew had to politely ask me to leave. The empty house was a mausoleum of my failures, and the office, with its clean lines and clear objectives, was my only sanctuary. Kendra, of course, was my self-appointed crisis manager. Her texts were a constant stream of empowerment clichés. You're a goddess, don't let any man dull your sparkle. And his loss? Now you're free to find someone who matches your frequency. She finally convinced me to go out. You need to get out of this funk. she'd insisted over the phone. Happy hour. Friday. That new rooftop bar, Cinder. You need to remember you're a catch. I didn't want to go, but the thought of another Friday night alone with my echoing thoughts was even less appealing. Cinder was exactly the kind of place Griffin would have hated. It screamed, "Look at me," from the gold-rimmed cocktail glasses to the ostentatious fire pits. It was filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury brand catalog, all talking loudly about stock options and summering in the Hamptons. Kendra was in her element, ordering rounds of champagne that cost more than my weekly groceries. "Your problem," she declared after her third glass, her voice a little too loud, "is that you married a principal, not a partner. The man is a walking charity ad. That's sweet, but it doesn't pay for Dior." Something about her words made me deeply uncomfortable, a flash of disloyalty that I quickly drowned in more champagne. It was then that she introduced me to her friend Julian. He was a hedge fund manager from New York, in town for a conference. He was everything Griffin wasn't. Sharp suit, a ridiculously expensive watch, and an easy, predatory confidence. He talked about acquisitions and market volatility with a casual fluency that I found both intimidating and intoxicating. He looked at me, really looked at me, with an expression that said he understood the currency of ambition. The champagne kept flowing. My head grew fuzzy, and the gnawing ache in my chest was replaced by a dangerous, glittering numbness. I found myself laughing at Julian's jokes, leaning into his orbit. He was listening to me, nodding intently as I described the complexities of the Kensington account, his eyes reflecting an appreciation or perhaps an assessment that I had been starved for. I knew where it was heading. I knew at the moment he offered to share his Uber back to his hotel, saying it was on the way to my house, even though it wasn't. The whole ride, a small, sober voice in the back of my mind was screaming, "Stop! Get out! Go home!" But a louder, more seductive voice, fueled by alcohol and a desperate need for validation, whispered, "Maybe this is what you need. Someone who gets it. Someone who won't make you feel guilty for wanting more." I woke up at 4 a.m. in a sterile, unfamiliar hotel room. My head was pounding, and my stomach was churning with a toxic cocktail of champagne and shame. On the nightstand, Julian's Rolex was ticking, the sound unnervingly loud in the quiet room, each tick a tiny hammer blow against my skull. I dressed in the dark, my movements clumsy and panicked. As I was slipping out the door, he stirred, murmuring something about getting breakfast in the morning, his voice thick with sleep. He said it with such casualness, as if this were normal, as if I were just another transaction in a busy week. The wave of nausea that hit me was so intense I had to brace myself against the wall. The Uber ride home was a silent tour through my own personal hell. The shame wasn't just about Julian, though that was a fresh, searing wound. It was about everything. I thought about Griffin's face when he showed me that picture of the garden kids, how it lit up with a kind of pure, unadulterated joy. When was the last time I had felt that about anything? Even the Kensington project, the monolith I had sacrificed my marriage for, now seemed hollow, a complex game with no real prize. I had been so certain that Griffin was the one who was settling, but as the car pulled up to my dark, empty house, I was struck by a terrifying thought. What if I was the one who had settled? I had settled for a cheap, fleeting imitation of connection because I had been too blind and too arrogant to appreciate the real thing. The days after my night with Julian were a fog of self-loathing. I avoided Griffin's calls. He had texted, trying to set up another meeting, saying he thought they could work through things if they were both willing to really listen. Each message was a fresh stab of guilt. How could I face him now? How could I look into those honest, kind eyes, knowing what I had done? He finally sent a text that I couldn't ignore. "Let's meet at the house. Our house. Sunday morning." I spent the entire morning in a frenzy of cleaning and preparation, a pathetic attempt to create an illusion of normalcy. I brewed his favorite coffee, bought the almond croissants he loved from the bakery downtown, and arranged them on the table as if we were just a normal couple about to have a normal Sunday chat. I was trying to stage a reconciliation, hoping that the familiar setting could somehow rewind time. He arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. That was Griffin, reliable, punctual, a quality I used to mock as boring. He looked different, resolved. He'd gotten a haircut, and he was wearing a new, crisp blue button-down instead of his usual faded hoodie. My stomach plummeted. This wasn't a man coming to negotiate peace. This was a man coming to deliver a verdict. We sat in the living room, the croissants untouched between us. "I've been seeing a therapist," he began, forgoing any small talk. The words hung in the air, clinical and sharp. "She's helped me understand some things. About us, about myself, about why I've felt so diminished in our marriage for so long." I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, but he held up a hand. "Please, Rowan, let me finish. I need to say this." He took a deep breath, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I love what I do. I love that my work makes a real difference. I love my garden program. And yes, I love that I can leave work at 5 p.m. and have time to actually live my life. That's not a lack of ambition. It's choosing a different kind of success." I know," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. "I've been thinking about that too." "Have you?" He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because here's what I think. I think you are so terrified of not being extraordinary that you've forgotten how to just be happy. Everything has to be bigger, better, more impressive. But when is it enough, Ro? When do you get to stop climbing and actually enjoy the view?" The guilt was a physical thing, choking me. I had to tell him. I had to confess before this went any further. "Griffin, there's something—" "I saw you, Rowan." 4 simple words. They landed in the quiet room and shattered my world into a million pieces. The air rushed out of my lungs. The room started to spin. "Last Friday," he continued, his voice cracking with a pain he could no longer hide, "I saw who you were with. I saw you get into his Uber. Griffin, don't. Just don't," he whispered. "You know what's funny? I came by that night. To surprise you. I'd spent all week thinking about what you said, about what I said. I had this whole speech planned about how we could compromise. I even bought your favorite gelato, the sea salt caramel one." He let out a short, broken laugh. "I waited outside for hours. When you didn't come home, I started calling hospitals, thinking something terrible had happened. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot, ugly sobs that I couldn't control. It didn't mean anything," I gasped. "I was drunk and upset and—" "And what?" He cut in, the bitterness in his voice like a slap. "Looking for someone more ambitious? Someone who was on your level?" He shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "You know what real ambition is, Rowan? It's working on something you believe in, even when it's not glamorous. It's choosing to be kind when it's easier to be cruel. It's building a marriage on a foundation of trust and respect, not on competition and status." I know I messed up," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "But we can fix this. We can go to counseling." "Number." He stood up, and I noticed for the first time that he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. The pale band of skin on his finger was a stark testament to the finality of his decision. "We can't fix this, because you still don't get it. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry because this tarnishes your perfect image." "Oh." He walked to the door, then turned back, his face a mask of sorrow. "I filed for divorce last week. The papers will be delivered tomorrow. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing this because we want fundamentally different things from life. And neither of us should have to fundamentally change who we are to make a marriage work." "But I love you," I choked out, hating how small and desperate I sounded. "Maybe you do," he said softly. "But you love your idea of success more." And with that, he opened the door and walked out of my life, leaving me alone in the wreckage. The divorce papers arrived the next morning, delivered by a courier who looked at me with impersonal pity. Griffin was as thorough and fair in our separation as he had been in our life together. He wasn't asking for anything but his personal belongings and his gardening equipment. He was leaving me the house I had been so proud of, the one I had pushed for. Sitting here now, in the cavernous living room, it feels less like a victory, and more like a monument to everything I got wrong. A week has passed. Or maybe it's a month. Time has become a thick, syrupy thing. I sit for hours surrounded by all the expensive objects I once saw as markers of success. The designer lamp that cost more than the annual budget for Griffin's garden program. The smart home system he said was an unnecessary indulgence. The framed magazine article about my firm's success hanging on the wall. They are all just things. Cold, silent things that offer no comfort. They are not enough. I keep thinking about what he said, about being so scared of not being extraordinary that I forgot how to be happy. When did that happen? When did I start measuring my life against Kendra's Instagram feed instead of my own heart? When did I decide that my husband's quiet, profound happiness was a personal failure of my own? My phone buzzes incessantly. Work emails I can't bring myself to open. Texts from Kendra asking if I want to get revenge cocktails. I've been letting her calls go to voicemail. I don't have the energy to listen to her shallow consolations anymore. My big project at work, the Kensington account, feels utterly insignificant. A complex puzzle that, once solved, reveals nothing of value. The promotion, the bonus, the house in Brighton Hills. The thought of them now fills me with a profound emptiness. Yesterday, I found Griffin's old Stanford hoodie crumpled at the back of the linen closet. I picked it up and held it to my face. It still smelled faintly of him, a mix of his soap and the rich, earthy scent of garden soil. I sank to the floor, clutching it like a lifeline, and I cried until there were no tears left. I had been so focused on pushing for more, more. A bigger title, a bigger house, a bigger life. I thought I was building a future. But all I was really building was a gilded cage, and I was so busy polishing the bars that I didn't notice I had locked myself inside, alone. He said I was chasing my potential, but I see it now. Griffin was living his. He was happy. He was fulfilled. He was enough. I told him he was a failure as a husband. Turns out I was the one who failed. I failed at being a wife. I failed at being a partner. I failed at being honest. Most of all, I failed at recognizing what truly matters. And now, I am left here, in this big, empty, successful house, picking up the pieces of a life I broke all by myself.